Šiandien kalbėsim apie galutinių taškų apsaugą. Hi, Tapio.
Hi, good morning, Kestutis. Good morning, attendees.
Dalinuosi skaidrėmis. Taigi šiandien trumpai apie galutinių, galbūt ne taip jau ir trumpai, apie galutinių taškų apsaugą. Taigi turim tokią situaciją šiais laikais, kad iš tikrųjų žodis antivirusas vis labiau nyksta ir rinka pasiskirščiusi į dvi kategorijas, į EPP, Endpoint Protection ir EDR, Endpoint Detection and Response. Ir šios technologijos po truputį apsijunginėja iš abiejų pusių, tai šiandien svečiuose turim SentinelOne atstovą Tapio Varamakį ir pradedam apie apsaugą. Taigi, kenksmingas kodas galutiniam taške gali būti aptiktas įvairiose fazėse. Viena iš tų fazių yra pre-execution, tai reiškia, kad dar nepaleidus kenksmingo kodo, jis gali būti aptiktas, pavyzdžiui, kopijuojant mums kenksmingą kodą iš USB rakto, iš tinklo katalogo ar kitur, ar įkelinėjant per nuotolinį prisijungimą. Tai šitoje vietoje dažniausiai apsaugos sprendimai naudoja įvairias signatūras, fuzzy hashingą, juodosius sąrašus ir kitus metodus paremtus statinės analizės būdais. Šiame etape dažniausiai kenksmingam kodui apeiti apsaugas yra lengviausia užduotis, tačiau kenksmingas kodas gali būti aptiktas ir paleidimo metu, tai vadinama on execution. Tai šiame etape įsijungia programos elgsenos, jos paleidimo metu analizės mechanizmai, mini smėliadėžės funkcionalumai, kurie bando nustatyti paleidimo metu, ar ta programa kenksminga ar nekenksminga, ir priimti sprendimą. Tai šiame etape be abejo apeinama dauguma statinių apsaugų, tokių kaip kodavimas, šifravimas, tačiau šioje vietoje galutinių taškų apsaugos sistemom yra labai mažai laiko nuspręsti vis dėlto ta programa kenksminga ar nekenksminga. Ir priėmus sprendimą, jeigu mes nežinom, kad kenksminga programa pasileidžia procesas ir jeigu ta programa kenksminga, mes jau turim iš tikro užkrėstą galutinį tašką, galutinę sistemą, ar tai būtų kompiuterinė darbo vieta ar serveris. Ir lieka paskutinis etapas, kuomet dar galutinių taškų apsauga gali aptikti kenksmingą kodą, tai yra po paleidiminiai veiksmai. Tai reiškia, reikia stebėti šito proceso, tos programos elgseną, analizuoti ją, žiūrėti, ką ta programa daro, kokius atlieka kreipinius, ar pasikrauna kitas kenksmingas bibliotekas išorinės ir panašiai. Amerikos standartas NIST apibrėžia tokio kibernetinio saugumo, pavadinkim, karkasą iš 5 dalių, kurių pirma yra identifikuoti. Antra dalis yra apsaugoti, tai būtent EPP arba Endpoint Protection sprendimai yra orientuoti į apsaugą. Tai reiškia tai, kad užkardyti kenksmingą kodą, užkardyti ataką, blokuoti ją, ir tai orientuoti EPP sprendimai, geriau mums žinomi kaip klasikiniai arba jau turbūt visi vadinami naujos kartos antivirusiniai sprendimai. EDR sprendimai atėjo truputį iš kitos srities, iš saugumo operacijų centrų, iš incidentų tyrimų kompetencijos, ir ilgą laiką ta technologija buvo, sakykime, mažai populiari dėl 2 pagrindinių priežasčių. Reikėjo ją prižiūrėti, reikėjo proaktyvios priežiūros, ir antra turbūt priežastis, kad ta technologija nebuvo pigi. Tai EDR technologija dažniausiai orientuojasi į Detect, Response ir dalinai recover fazes. Tai va čia turbūt yra pagrindinė takoskyra, bet šiandien dienai turim tai, kad EPP ir EDR technologijas apsijunginėja tiek iš vienos pusės, tiek iš kitos. Ir pabandysim tokį trumpą užpildyti survey, kad labiau įsivaizduoti, kaip iš tikrųjų mes gyvenam. Taip, tai šiame trumpam klausimine jūs galite atsakyti į vieną ar daugiau klausimų, kaip reaguoti į veikiančio kenksmingo kodo galutinėme kompiuteryje žinią. Tiksliau, kai sužinot, kad sistema yra užkrėsta, tai galbūt jūs pamatėte ugnesinį pranešimą, kad vyksta skambučiai namo iš kažkurio tai IP adreso ar kompiuterio. Ir kaip elgiatės, kokias priemonės turit, kokius metodus naudojat. Tai bus įdomu pasižiūrėti ir pasidalinti visiems bendrai. Tikrai įdomi lietuviška perspektyva. Tai dar kažkiek sekundžių palauksime užpildančiųjų. Tai tik pamatysiu, kad aktyvumas jau pasibaigė, tai galėsim aptarti rezultatus ir man įdomu ir tikiuosi, kad jums bus labai irgi įdomu. Dar matau vienas kitas pasirinkimus savo atliekate. Turbūt galbūt aptarsim rezultatus anglų kalba. Tapia, we will share the results in English.
Okay.
That you understand.
Yes.
How do we live here? Taip, matau, dar pildot. Ačiū visiems. Šį kartą laiko ribojimo nenustatėm, tiesiog reaguosim pagal situaciją. Gerai, tada aš turbūt jau baigiu šią apklausėlę ir pasižiūrim rezultatus. Tikiuosi rezultatus matot. And Tapio, your question was how our respondents react to malicious code in Endpoint. We found some alerts in the firewall, SIEM solutions, etc. And 20% of respondents respond that we physically disconnect computer from the internal networks. 10% of respondents use some programmatic tools, security solutions to quarantine, isolate infected computer from internal networks. About 30% of respondents said that we scan infected system with various antivirus and security tools in safe mode. About 20% looks for indicators of compromise and furthers the incident response with disk and memory forensics. About 15% of respondents told that we reinstalled the computer, and about 8% respond that we restore computer from the backup. So thanks all for response. Back to presentation. Tai ačiū dar kartą visiems užpildusiems, buvo labai įdomu ir tikrai rezultatai pakankamai yra įvairūs. Jeigu žiūrėti į kenksmingą kodą iš kietojo disko, pavadinkim, arba iš atminties perspektyvos, vėlgi, kadangi Windows aplinkoje kenksmingas programinis kodas tiek diske, tiek atmintyje iš portable executable formato atrodo vienodai, tai reiškia, kaip programa atrodo ant disko, tai ją paleidus lygiai tokią pačią struktūrą išlaiko atmintyje. Tai reiškia, kad mes galim ištrinti kenksmingą programą, kuri buvo paleista ir sėkmingai veiks atmintyje. Diską liesti yra pakankamai jautru ir labai yra didelė rizika, kad antivirusinės į tai sureaguos ir būsime užblokuoti. Todėl kenksmingo kodo gamintojai įsilaužėliai iš tikrųjų mėgsta naudoti tik atmintyje veikiančius kenksmingus programinius kodus. Ir čia iš tikrųjų matom įvairių taktikų, kaip veikia atmintyje veikiantis kenksmingas programinis kodas. Vienais atvejais Jis būna netgi aptinka, kad kompiuteris yra perkraunamas ar išjungiamas ir tik tokiu atveju paliečia diską ir rašo failus tam, kad po perkrovimo vėlgi galėtų kenksmingas kodas būti pakrautas ir sėkmingai gyvuoti toliau. Ir ypatingai retais atvejais yra tik atmintyje veikiančių kenksmingų programų, kurios iš tikrųjų sudaro vidiniuose tinkluose taip vadinamas taškas arba peer-to-peer botnetus. Ir vienai sistemai persikrovus vienam kompiuteriai, kiti kompiuteriai, kuriuose veikia kenksmingas programinis kodas, pasirūpina, kad po kompiuterio perkrovimo ta sistema vėl būtų užkrėsta iš naujo. Jeigu pasižiūrėti į klasikinius mūsų antivirusus arba dabar jau vadinamus EPP, Endpoint Protection kategorijos, tai vėlgi, jeigu mes matome saugumo pranešimą, kaip šiuo atveju, kad kenksmingas kodas buvo aptiktas atmintyje, matom, tai bendrinė grėsmės pavadinimą 302 bitų, Rozena grėsmėms priskiriamas XK modifikacijos variantas. Vėlgi matom, kad yra paliestas Windows vartotojo pusės arba userland procesas RAN 302, RAN-DLL 32 ir kad ta grėsmė buvo užkardyta. Kaip ir viskas yra labai puiku, bet iš tikrųjų su klasikiniais sprendimais mes nematom daug dalykų, kas vyko fone. Kaip iš tikrųjų tas kenksmingas kodas atsirado atmintyje. Tai šiuo atveju šitą kenksmingą kodą į Windows atmintį nukopijavo PowerShell skriptas, kenksmingas PowerShell skriptas. Ta kenksmingą PowerShell skriptą paleido kenksmingas Visual Basic skriptas, kuris buvo patalpintas Microsoft Word dokumente kaip makrosas. Tas dokumentas buvo atidarytas iš elektroninio pašto. Vėlgi elektroninis paštas tai buvo web paštas, webmailas. Ir šiuo atveju atidaryta svetainė, elektroninio pašto svetainė buvo su naršykle Chrome. Tai vat, matom, kiek daug yra konteksto, kurio mes iš tikrųjų nematom su klasikiniais sprendimais ir kiek mums tai mažai padeda tirti incidentą ir įvykį. Tai vėlgi iškyla klausimai, galbūt yra įmonėje ir daugiau aukų, kurias gavo šitą kenksmingą laišką ir jų antivirusinės programos arba galutinių taškų apsaugos programos nebuvo savalaikiškai atnaujintos ir galbūt tas kodas ten kenksmingai pasileido. Tai kiek tokių yra kompiuterių, kiek juose pasileido sėkmingai kenksmingas kodas ir mums reikalingi sprendimai tokie kaip EDR. Ir šitoj vietoj turėtumėm dar didesnę problemą, jeigu iš tikrųjų kenksmingas kodas pasileido ir mes neturime jokio pranešimo. Tai apie EDR vieną iš sprendimų, kuris beje turi ir Endpoint Protection savybę, šiandien papasakos Tapio, tiksliau apie SentinelOne. Now, Tapio, it's your stage.
Okay, very good, and Thank you again for a very nice introduction and backgrounding. And the idea today is to talk a bit more detailed about the subjects Kestutis just introduced and briefly covered. And the idea today is to really to talk a little bit about the digital transformation, what we have seen now during and probably also after COVID. And we are discussing a little bit, having a little look at how this has impacted to security conditions and what kind of changes have we seen over there. And then we will discuss a little bit about the evolution and changes at the AV and EDR side. What kind of changes have we, or what kind of evolution are we seeing over there? And in the end of the session, we are going to have a little demo, depending how much time we have available. And if you have any questions, any thoughts, we are happy to discuss and provide some answers. And Kestutis also, if you point out some relevant points during the conversation, feel free to jump in and kind of give your thoughts, and we can take it bit of more interactive. And just a brief introduction of myself. So I work as a technologist at the company called Exclusive Networks. We are distributing SentinelOne all over EMEA, and we are working with the managed service provider partners, reseller partners, integrator partners such as Bluebridge. And I've been working with SentinelOne for quite some time. It's a familiar tool to us, and I've seen also a bunch of other AV and EDR tools. So in that respect, we have a pretty nice experience and visibility of what SentinelOne is about. And maybe we can start going through our content. So let's start from the digital transformation and the impact of that transformation for our security posture, and generally to our way how we maintain our IT infrastructure. So I took this report from McKinsey, and which they did a survey to organizations, and they asked a lot of questions and kind of ideas about the digital transformation and how COVID impacted to move to remote work and remote connectivity to all kind of like new ways of working last year when we had to go into very quarantined and isolated way of working. And the key question over here was, or not the key question, but some of the key findings, which I find very interesting, are over here on this particular slide. So let's use this arrow. And they asked the organizations that what was your expected time required to implement some of these changes in your organization. And we are having two numbers over here. We are having the expected number, what the companies had predicted that how much time it would require, for example, to move to remote working or collaboration. And then we see the actual time that it required to implement this change. And then we see something they call as an acceleration factor, a multiple, where we see that how much faster this change was in reality instead of the expectations. And we will start over here from remote working and collaboration. We all remember in late February last year, maybe early March, mid-March last year, when we start to receive a lot of these news regarding COVID, and every day there came more warnings, more very alerting news that this is very bad virus. It's we need to close the borders. Maybe it's better to not to go to the offices. And even after after a couple of weeks or months, at least in Finland, they closed even the schools, which meant that the students, the only option for them to study was to join a Teams meeting organized by the class teacher, and then they gave like homework for people to do. And all that changed. It came so quickly that instead of these 1.5 years that the organizations expected to this change to take, all this change on average, it happened in 10.5 days. And the acceleration factor was 43. It meant that 43 times faster the organizations moved to remote working and collaboration. And there's also a lot of general questions over here, but let's point out some other interesting, more cybersecurity and IT related points over here. So let's have a look at the migration of assets to cloud services. And on average, the organizations expected that this move and migration to cloud services would take something like 547 days. And in reality, they were able to migrate in 23.2 days. And again, the acceleration factor was 24, which means that 24 times faster these organizations were able to migrate from on-prem to cloud. Some of their assets, it could be a server, it could be maybe some VDI machine, it could be maybe an application, but some assets were migrated to cloud. And let's have one more look over here. Build redundancies into supply chain, which means that it can be a physical supply chain, it can be a virtual supply chain, but some redundancies, maybe introducing a second hosting cluster somewhere, or maybe having two logistics carriers, or whatever is the mechanism. We see a lot of speed over here, and we see also a similar increase in this on the spending on data security. And why this is relevant for our today's discussion is because I believe that if someone is moving to this remote work in 43 times faster, or they are moving to cloud 24 times faster than they expected, I think that there's maybe some room for some errors, or maybe some gray areas, maybe some areas which we have not fully covered in our planning, in our delivery plan, and in our project. So normally, if you have 1.5 years to go through the migration or delivery of a new application, you probably have a lot of time in every phase of the project, and you probably can cover also the security part quite well. But then if you are in a hurry like this, that might result in some pretty quick moves, and that might leave some areas of your IT solutions a little bit unsecured, or maybe not even reviewed by your security teams. I have also another study over here, and that's coming from a company called Axonius, and they published a report called Cybersecurity Asset Management Trends 2021 a couple of weeks ago. And this report, it was more specific about the IT asset management and about the IT assets. And generally what kind of findings these guys had was pretty similar, but more technology specific. And the question we are having on this slide is about the question is that, what do you believe are the biggest reasons your organization's IT environment has become more complex? So what they are asking over here is that what's kind of, what were the drivers, or what are the drivers for complexity? And the key reason is that increased number of remote workers, change to technology infrastructure necessitated by privacy and security regulations. Okay, this may be a little bit less COVID related, but still important. Increased device type diversity and complexity. Increased use of public cloud infrastructure. Increased reliance on third-party vendors. And increase in number of cloud providers in use, increase of use of shadow IT apps. And I think, for example, this one is a very good finding over here. When we move to more remote work environment, it meant that maybe the employees start to use some new applications they found useful. Maybe they saw that their children at school are using some very handy app to communicate with each other, maybe share some results, and maybe we just start to use these same applications. And of course, it's probably good for our productivity, but the challenge might be that it's not always good for our security. Maybe there's some weak security practices used as a part of those services. Maybe we don't have a central governance for those services if they are shadow IT services. And that's, of course, always a risk for our security posture. And generally, what we started to see last year is kind of quicker impact on many of the security challenges we have seen already on past couple of years. But last year, all this just kind of it was just emphasized much more than ever before because of all these changes. And if we look at the security condition we are seeing across these enterprises, we are having these same challenges as we are seeing every week, every month, every day, and at many of the organizations, and these are repeated in a lot of studies. And let's start from one of the key challenges, which is always having too many tools. If there's a functional overlap within your tools, that causes some operational difficulty and maybe slowness, maybe some stickiness, and that's of course makes you slower and eventually weaker in defending and securing the organization IT. There's this traditional challenge, and this is particularly associated with the endpoints and with the EDR, with AV, that there's too much noise. And we will talk more about this later on. These things can be a little bit tricky, which means that if the tools we have are difficult to use, if the results are difficult to interpret, it can cause some challenges or it will cause challenges for our security teams. And if our tools are not able to cover all the attack vectors, all the platforms, all the operating systems we have in use, all the devices we have in use, all the workloads we have in use, there's going to be blind spots, and that's bad for us. It's enough that the adversary can land on one of the devices, one of the assets with lower security posture, and they can start spreading and moving laterally. And then, of course, there might be some or many of the bottlenecks, which can be process related, they can be technology related, or they can people related. And these are our typical challenges we are seeing across many of the organizations. I try to stop sharing because I tried to share another thing. Let's see. I'm trying to share the entire screen, and we move over here. Let's see. Kestutis, can you confirm if you can see now my PowerPoint?
Yes, I see him.
Okay, so I added some more content over here. So because I saw something pretty interesting just yesterday. So if we think about the situation, all this migration or these changes, this quick change to cloud, remote work, remote connectivity, remote collaboration, and then we think about these complexity drivers and kind of limitations we are having. one might ask that, okay, what's the impact? What does it matter? Does this have any like real life impact? And I think this is just a great example where we are in reality. So the article over here is saying that the United States will be treating cyber attacks with the same urgency as terrorism. And this is, of course, now connected to the fact that the Colonial Pipeline were attacked, and as a precaution, they have to shut down their operations because they were so afraid that this ransomware that infected some of their machines will spread to their production systems and might cause some, let's call it, permanent damage, too big damage. So they had to suspend their oil distribution operations, and that result or caused oil shortage in certain parts of the US, and they had to pay very high, I think it was something like 4 to 5 million of ransoms to the attackers. But this is just, what we are seeing, and it's no matter if it's a targeted or non-targeted attack, the outcome is the same. If you have an open RDP port, or if you have a vulnerable VPN device, the attackers are able to get into your network, and they are able to infect even a single machine, which might be able to spread their ransomware. That's going to cause you a lot of operational problems, and in worst case might stop a lot of your business operations. And that's going to make your life very, very difficult. And then if we dive into more AV related and EDR related changes and challenges, we can have a quick look at the AV products. And we are going to discuss them even more detailed in the coming slides. But the general challenge with a lot of the legacy AV tools is the fact that they are still relying mainly on signatures. There might be some heuristic type of or some heuristic capabilities and techniques they are using, but the key detection mechanism is still signatures, which generally means that it's a string matching. You take a signature, you compare it to your portable executable or document or whatever you have, and see if there's a match. If not, it's a good file. If yes, it means that it's a malicious file. We want to stop it. And we will see a bit later why this might not be a good idea to have as your only approach. Then we might see that there's like more tools deployed, and maybe there are more features. I'm having like a web filtering feature, I'm having a file scanning feature, I'm having maybe a ransomware module, I'm having a lot of different features, engines, and we might have even like a lot of dedicated tools, which ideally is good. But then if we remember these complexity challenges we spoke about on the previous slide, that's gonna start producing other type of challenges for us. And the more manual is the way how we work, the more challenging that's gonna become when we try to make it scale. If you're a small organization with a limited number of devices, with limited number of employees, you might be able to work in more manual process, more manual ways. But when we start talking about scaling to hundreds, thousands, or even higher number of devices, of people, many sites, many locations, I can't probably afford pouring a lot of manual resources on trying to work with the detections and with the investigations and response. And like we saw on the previous slides, this migration to remote work, it changed the architectures, how our networks are built. And then the key challenge is, of course, that if our security architecture has been such that we really rely on the controls that are deployed into our office networks and our managed networks, what happens at the moment when our employees connect to our cloud services, O365, Salesforce, whatever is the desired service? What happens if someone connects there without connecting our enterprise network first? What if the traffic is not flowing via our corporate network? Or what if someone is connecting with an unmanaged device and that might be beyond our control entirely? And yeah, this cloud, it's causing a challenge of its own. Let's build up this slide over here, and what we are seeing then in the AV and the EDR space, and Kestutis also spoke a little bit about this, is this evolution from step by step. And the old and the so-called legacy approach that was based on the signatures and really on the and let's say even if we are not relying on the signatures, let's say that we have a bit of more behavior and bit more advanced detection capabilities. The key idea with the so-called old or prevention-driven approach was to was to stop everything at the moment when the possible threat arrived. And it's a really strong approach as long as you can stop everything. But as we know, it's very, very difficult to stop or be 100% secure. And then the key question is that, okay, what happens to the remaining 1% that gets through? And then, of course, the challenge over here is that we rarely find advanced attacks with this approach. We are not going to find PowerShell-driven attacks. We are not going to probably find attacks which are utilizing the native tools on our operating systems like PS, process execution, or net commands or anything like that. It's mainly the document scanning, it's mainly the executable scanning, and that's about it. Then came the next generation, and this is what we are seeing a lot available in the market right now. We have more advanced tools which are recording and monitoring your system. And that is also what SentinelOne is doing. It's connected to the device kernel or to your operating system on the kernel level. And it's really following what is happening on the device. It's following the processes. It's following the memory consumption, what's happening on the disk and all of that. But then the key question with this approach is that, okay, if we can understand more detail what is happening on the device, what happens? What are we doing with the telemetry we are collecting? And this is where we can see a lot of differentiation between different EDR tools with these little bit more modern tools. And many of these vendors are saying that, you need to connect the tool to our cloud service, and then some sort of cloud magic happens over there. So it's either people doing some analysis, or they have some sort of a centralized engine that is doing the analysis. But that usually results a bit more reactive responses, maybe a bit more complex recovery. And the thing is that usually these tools are not that automated. They usually require a bit more human interaction. They are more resource consuming in terms of human resources. So it's really like that, okay, we have a nice collection technologies over here. We are seeing a lot of telemetry, but it's still people who are really making the decisions. And now the kind of third generation of these EDR tools is the generations and the approach that SentinelOne is representing. And the idea is that, okay, we definitely want to collect all the telemetry. We definitely want to understand well how our machine is behaving, how it's consuming different type of resources. But we want to model this information automatically, and we want to make this very, very simple to use. We don't want to, give our opinion and our, spend some time on every single possible alert, if this is good or bad. We want to have our tool to be as autonomous as possible, so that we can spend as little time on these tools as possible to keep us safe and secure. And then if something happens, yes, we are going to involve people, but we don't need to have an army of security analysts working on to keep our organization safe. But instead of that, we actually have a solution that allows fewer people to scale more.
Tapio, we have a few questions, but think one of them is very suitable to this slide. Aurim is asking when EDR solution will be available for personal purposes, not for business. As we remember, classical antivirus solution vendors always had a couple of plans or products, separate products. One of them with more basic functionalities for personal use, and other antivirus plans from the same vendor for commercial enterprise customers.
Yep, that's a very, very good question, because it would be quite nice to have a bit more advanced endpoint protection for the consumer use. And of course, the reality is that if we were able to secure a lot of consumer endpoints, there probably would be much less ransomware and many other incidents. To my knowledge, there's a little bit limited availability from the kind of the leading vendors what comes to the personal use. But I guess when we are seeing a bit more evolution of this whole EDR space, I guess some of these more consumer-driven markets will probably, or vendors, they probably will start providing more consumer-driven tools. And of course, if we think about these and these vendors, some of them are already providing these EDR tools for a lower price point, and maybe we are not gonna see them for free of charge immediately, like you had Avast or some other vendors for AV. But I believe we are gonna start seeing more of these maybe a small business or consumer type of, or micro enterprise type of subscriptions and pricing plans. And those could be suitable also for people who are interested in securing their personal computers.
I believe that there's two reasons. As I mentioned, it's mostly vendors, EDR vendors are growing very fast in the world. And we have some experience asking to came some vendors to Lithuania, and they told that we are growing too fast in United States that we don't even plan to start the business in Europe. So when, how to say, business will grow up and we need to expand, I believe we come to consumer business also. And second reason, as we see that threat actors mostly targeting government enterprises and organizations. So, for example, ransomware is not so popular to attack personal individuals, not enterprises, and those two things will change, I believe.
Yeah. I think with ransomware, you're right. So if I have to choose as an attacker, okay, do I want to have a ransom of 1 million from a single enterprise, or do I want to try to infect 10,000 consumers and maybe get the money from 200 of them? It's going to be much easier to work against this single enterprise. There is much higher pressure I can push against the enterprise by threatening that we are going to reveal your company secrets, we are going to publish some information. So I think the focus is over there right now. And also, I think maybe as of now, these tools are more suitable for organizations or maybe service providers who have already some security knowledge. And then if we think about the traditional approach, how the legacy AV vendors are working, what they are saying that, deploy our agent and you are safe. And here with the EDR, with the modern EDR tool, the approach is more like that, let's try to make you as secure as we can. But the reality is that something might happen. But at least you have tools to understand what happened, and we have tools to recover and respond to those things that happened. So also the way of thinking here is a little bit different. On the left side, it's very like prevention driven, and here it's more like that, we give you tools to take actions if something bad happens or when something bad happens. And that maybe takes us to next slide, where we can have a quick look the way how we can or how this works. So we can still do the signature based kind of hash detection if that's something we want, and that's a very, very quick way of filtering out of noise, and it's very effective for known bads. So it's no mean to leave it out, but the reality is that it's not going to cover everything. So it's very important. It's not only our only way of working. And you can have that with SentinelOne. But then maybe the more interesting and a bit more sophisticated and next generation way for doing the hash analysis is something called deep file analysis. And instead of just taking the hash of the file, SentinelOne trains a machine learning model where they enter millions of malicious files and good files, and they start extracting something they call as an attributes of execution, and they train a model to identify how does look a good PDF file, how does look bad PDF file. If I have a portable executable, how should it look? What kind of compiler we are normally seeing used to compile the file? When has it been compiled? What kind of API calls it might have? Is there any parameters it's running? And there's a lot of these attributes of we can extract. And this is a more powerful way of seeing if a file is good or bad. And for example, when we are doing some of our lab ransomwares, it's very difficult to make them pass this phase. So it seems to be quite powerful. But then the even more important is to understand, because not all the threats are file driven and file based anymore. So then what is becoming more and more important is to understand the device behavior and what is actually happening on real time. And that's something SentinelOne calls as a dynamic behavior technology. And the way how this works is that we monitor a lot of things on the kernel and user space. And then if we see something deviating from the normal or something against the rules that SentinelOne defines in each of the releases, then we will raise a flag. There's either bad behavior or maybe there's suspicious behavior, but we make the security team aware. And we, of course, depending on the policies, we will also stop that behavior. And then if something bad happens, we are going to have all the remediation tools available, so we can kill offending processes. If it's a file originated, we can currently the file. We can clean up everything, maybe with a single mouse click. There's also a possibility to roll back to previous known good backup that applies to Windows. We can isolate the machine from the network. We will still have SentinelOne management console access to that particular machine, but it's not going to be able to communicate with or it's not going to be able to have any other network communications. We can manage the firewall of that device, and we will protect the backup files. We'll protect also the protection engine of SentinelOne. And then, of course, once we have recovered and kind of currently or isolated the machine, we have understood what happened. We want to have a possibility and tools to run searches and queries across our rest of the enterprise or other machines. Are we seeing any of these similar threats over there? And this is supporting all the known operating systems, including Windows, Mac, and Linux. There's like 10 distributions of Linux, pretty much all the Windowses, and also containers are supported as long as it's Kubernetes you are using to manage them.
Tapio, maybe you have a couple of slides about SentinelOne XDR product, or tell some words about difference between EDR and XDR from portfolio perspective.
Sure, and let's move to XDR next. Before that, I just show this idea of this kind of behavior tracking. So the way how your computer looks is that, okay, you're gonna have like tens or hundreds or maybe thousands of processes running over there. And then it's very difficult to say what's good, what's bad. So for that to make it scale, you need to understand it well from the you need automation to detect what's good, what's bad. Because the thing is that if there's even a single process and a step somewhere in that particular process or story which consists of multiple processes, it's enough that there's one single bad point or malicious point over there. And then if that gets executed, then we start seeing a long chain of bad actions. And these things can happen very quickly. They can use your operating system native tools. So it can be quite difficult to even detect, even if you see all those processes, that what's good, what's bad. And the most important thing or the idea over here is that with the preventative tools, you try to always prevent this point happening, this moment happening. But the thing is that sometimes it's very, very difficult or not possible. And then the thing is that you need to really understand what has happened, why we are seeing suspicious or bad behavior. And we really want to understand what happened during this attack, after this attack or execution, and before it. And then, of course, if we can understand all this, then it's very easy for us to be able to take some responsive actions, kill these offending processes, maybe revert the changes the offending process did, and maybe remove and currently the offensive files, if any, involved. And then let's talk about and this, by the way, then in real life, how it would look that, okay, we have a WinWord starting, a PowerShell, and then bad things start happening. So that's really the point where we need to be able to stop it. Okay, just a second. Let's open. I have a slide about this XDR question. So let's just open the correct. Correct slide over here. And we drill down a little bit over here, scroll down, and then we share again. So Kestutis, I think your question about XDR, you want to know a little bit more about like how SentinelOne sees EDR and XDR differentiating.
Yeah, that's the question from attendee.
Okay. Yep. So let's share again. So you can see now the screen again, PowerPoint. Can you see?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. So yeah, the idea of the XDR is having we take another slide and then we come back to this slide. So we had the presentation about the XDR last week with Exabeam. And what we learned during that presentation is that we can split XDR into a couple of different or modules or elements. It consists of several items. And it consists of sensors. It consists of backend engines and then content that is feeding these engines and that is putting these sensors together. And we also learned that there's two different type of XDR models available. We spoke about open or hybrid XDR, where these different elements come from different vendors. Or there is native XDR, which means that all these elements come from the same vendor. And in the case of SentinelOne, SentinelOne is a point solution which is focusing on the endpoint server, cloud workload, virtual desktop protection. It does it very well, and it does it in very simplified way, minimizing the human involvement. But then if you need to have visibility on network level, or if you need to connect it to a CM solution, it means that there's APIs available. And with those APIs, we are gonna integrate SentinelOne EDR tool as a part of broader XDR ecosystem. SentinelOne made an acquisition. Let's try to find the slide over here. So SentinelOne made an acquisition recently called Scalar, and what this Scalar is, it's a log management solution. So probably what we are gonna see future is that you can either pull all SentinelOne data to other systems, which you can do already. You can do it via syslog, via the API, or via Kafka streams. But in the future, it's going to probably work also to another direction, that if you don't have your CM, maybe you can ingest your logs to SentinelOne's direction and then have a broader visibility over here. But to be very specific, your question right now, what the way how SentinelOne sees XDR is this gives you a very comprehensive visibility to your cloud assets and your cloud workloads, your endpoints, servers, and BDIs. But it's not like your integration or your orchestration tool that drives all the elements for that, you will have other integration tools as we saw over here. So we could, for example, last week we spoke about Exabeam. So for example, Exabeam, the way how you integrate it with Exabeam is that, you are going to consume all the data, all the information that SentinelOne provides Exabeam direction. And then if you find an infected endpoint or you get the alert from other tool, let's say from the network tool, then we can raise an alert and trigger an automated playbook from one of the or our desired SOAR tool, and then call back to SentinelOne and say that, okay, what we want to isolate this endpoint, we want to currently these files. So the integrations work to both directions.
Question was also about integrations and partnership with other vendors. Mostly SentinelOne partnerships with the commercial vendors, or they are also supporting some open source security solutions?
Yep, a good question. So the API of SentinelOne is it's very well documented, and there's you can get pretty much any data out of it you want, or you can also command it via the API. And that means that if the integration is not there, you can probably do it by yourself. Of course, the more complex it is, the more time it will require. But we have, for example, built some of our own integrations in our lab, and we have, for example, we are fetching some information from SentinelOne API to our open source tools. So both are supported.
One more question was about main advantages, technical advantages against open source EDR products like Elasticsearch EDR. What's the strongest points?
What was the solution? Which EDR?
Elasticsearch EDR.
Yeah, well, the thing is that if we, okay, let's go back to our slide.
I see you have many presentations today.
Yes, we have a lot of info over here. So if we go back to this slide, we can maybe categorize Elastic EDR being middle over here. You are collecting a lot of telemetry. You don't even need an EDR solution to collect this endpoint telemetry. It's enough if you have Windows event collector, and then you are gonna already collect a lot of telemetry from your endpoint. But the key thing is that it's not about having the telemetry, but it's about reading that information, and it's about taking actions on that information. And I think that's where the kind of key players in the industry are truly differentiating themselves. And you can have a look at the MITRE's ingenuity tests. So it's the test framework where MITRE is testing almost all vendors, EDR vendors in the market against the threats that we have seen in real life. So they are doing tests with on the attack tools that the different ATP groups are using. And over there, you can see that most of the vendors, they can collect most of the telemetry seen associated to those attacks. But then the thing with MITRE is that then you have these TTPs, tactics, techniques, and procedures. And the more you are able to detect those tactics and techniques and procedures, the more sophisticated the engine of your EDR tool is, and probably more value it can give to you. And that's like one side of the coin. So that's more like about seeing and detecting what is happening over there. And then the other side of the coin is, of course, all these response and mitigation tools. So what if we saw something happening and what if something bad happened? What kind of tools we have available for taking the response, and how easy or difficult, how quick or slow it is to take those responsive actions. And that's probably other area where you see a lot of differentiation between the open source and the commercial vendors. And then on top of that, of course, for example, SentinelOne, CrowdStrike, many of the kind of leading EDR vendors, they have started to offer more and more these MDR, Managed Detection and Response services, where they can help you in the case that there's a difficult attack and you don't know what to do and how to remediate by yourself. So then they provide like commercial services on top of that.
So maybe we are running out of the time. So maybe Tapio, we can switch the demo short.
Yep. If you believe we still have time for demo, I'm happy to dive in.
I'm afraid that people are hungry and lunchtime.
Yes. So let's do the demo. I had it somewhere here. Okay, let's go there. I put it on the video so that we can make it very effective in terms of time consumption. We don't need to go through the whole demo. This is not the latest GUI we are using, but it's not the key thing. The key thing is to give you the idea of the logic, how it works, and then you get the idea. So what we are having over here is an environment of 4 endpoints, and 2 of those endpoints are online currently. And the key thing is that we have 0 active threats, and there's no threats requiring mitigation right now. So this is the way how our console looks, and we have 2 machines connected currently, Windows device, and then we have Active Directory DC machine. And currently our policy is that we are in the detection only mode, because if we put it in the protect mode, we could not run our demo. And this is, all the configurations you need or can do with SentinelOne. So the idea is to make it very, very simple. And what we are seeing over here is a tool called Process Hacker. It's like Windows Resource Manager, but this can see all the processes in a bit more detail, and also the child processes, parent processes. We see also like, the starting process, the stopping processes with different colors. Then we have our C hard drive of our victim machine. And then we have the registry editor of our victim machine. And then we have a Cobalt Strike attack console over here. This is the attacker's machine. And what we are seeing now is that the user will click one of these. So this is an executable driven malware. And the user will click an Excel file over here on the desktop. And there is a bad macro or malicious macro associated or embedded in the file. And now you can see that Excel starts in the Process Hacker. You can see the process with green color. And SentinelOne already says that there's a threat detected, but because it's only in a monitor only mode, we will let the file run. And now we close Excel, or it's still open. But what already happened? Our machine got infected, and what happens after that is that this infected device will call to home to the attacker. It will establish a CNC channel, as we are seeing over here. There's already an initial beaconing established, and it will download a bigger payload and install a complete attack pack on the machine, and it will make it persistent on this machine. And now when we are looking at the Process Hacker, we see that there's an Excel running, and it has started a PowerShell over here, and we are initiating some communications, and now PowerShell has already been killed. So everything that happened very quickly, and we are seeing that there's a lot of network traffic associated with PowerShell. And we can also see that there's a beacon.exe file has appeared on our C drive. And what the attacker can do is start interacting on this particular machine. And because of the time limitations, we are like fast forwarding a little bit over here. And what is happening here is that we are just seeing that the attacker is doing a lot of interaction with the infected machine, with the native tools of that machine. And we are creating a registry key to the registry to make it persistent. So every time the machine is rebooting, this malware will call home again. And then if we go to SentinelOne console, what we are seeing is that there's one alert and there's a machine with possible infection. And we can see some of the details or more details about the machine. We see the network connectivity. We see an attack overview over here. We see which files it has touched, how much network activity it has had, if there's been any registry changes. And then we see the entire process chain. We see the PowerShell starting here from Excel. We see the beacon.exe starting. We see a lot of additional command line connections. And then as a part of the interaction, we saw a lot of commands executed like arp.exe. We saw who am I. So these are typical recon commands the attacker would use. And what is happening next is that we can even search that, okay, can we see all the machines which have this beacon.exe, all the processes that has a beacon as part of their name. And the only machine where we see this running is this infected machine. But we have tools here to run a complete search to see that if there's any other machines which have the same offending processes running. And then I can, for example, run a search for any processes that are associated to this particular offending process. And now I see all the processes associated. I see all the DNS queries associated, all the URL queries associated, all the network actions. And these are very good tools if I'm a more advanced, if my security maturity is already bit higher, and we have stronger security knowledge. So then these tools these are tools I'm interested in having in order to understand fully what happened and if this has spread to any other parts of our environment. But then if I'm more like a regular organization with maybe one guy sitting in our IT or maybe two guys over there, most of our things are outsourced. I'm not going to understand too much about these things. And that's the thing. So the key idea is not to, spend a lot of time over here. These things are very important if we need to go over here, if we need to have visibility, and if we understand how to use this information. But this should not be the key idea of having your EDR tool. If this is the only thing that it provides, that we can provide you full visibility, it means that you're spending a lot of time analyzing these things, and many of the organizations are not even able to do it. And then we can have all kind of process trees and a lot of other things over here. So this is the kind of visibility we are getting with the good EDR tool to possible infection and malicious processes. And then let's have a look at the recovery part. So bad things happened. What can we do to mitigate the recover from the attack? So we remember all these things. And now what we are doing, we are taking some mitigative actions. Let's fast forward a little bit here. And We are, by the way, seeing also some MITRE TTP. And now what we are seeing is that we see the beacon.exe process is still running on the machine. We have the registry key over here. It's still there. And we have all this connectivity to attacker infrastructure. And the beacon.exe, it's on the C drive. And now when we click remediate, which means that it kills all the offending processes, it guarantees all bad files if there are any associated, and it reverts back all the changes the malware did. And what will happen is that all this happens now automatically when I click remediate. And if we go back to our victim machine, what we are seeing here is that all these offending processes are getting killed. The file beacon.exe already disappeared from our C drive. And now if we refresh our registry, we see that the persistent key also disappeared. And there is no longer this Excel file on our desktop. And all that happened in less than 2 seconds. And by the way, if the attacker tried to continue the interaction, the connection is dead, so they could not interact anymore. And then as a final demo item, we just see that, okay, if we had the protection policy enabled, how would the demo look like? Let's take a look over here. So the policies are now defined, and then we click the macro Excel file over here, and we can see in the process hacker that Excel started. It's with the red color over here, but nothing else happens. We don't see the beacon.exe over here. This tried to create an initial connection, but it was never established properly. And the malware, the file was guaranteed, the offending process immediately got killed, and we see that, okay, there's one unsolved threat over here, but we can see that it took all the actions automatically. And now the only thing I would need to do is to flag this as a resolved incident.
Okay.
So that's our demo for the day.
I believe we have time running out totally, so ačiū visiems dar kartą sudalyvavusiems ir jeigu nesunku paprašysiu užpildyti trumpą grįžtamąjį ryšį.